The church bell echoed softly across the sleepy little western town. That kind of quiet place where everyone knew everyone, where cowboys tipped their hats and ladies guarded their secrets behind forced smiles and Sunday dresses. And somewhere outside those church doors stood a woman, trembling so hard she could barely breathe, her wedding veil fluttering like a frightened butterfly caught in the wind. Her name was Ilara, and though everyone believed she was here, joyfully marrying a man wealthy enough to own half the cattle in Wyoming, her eyes told a story no one knew, a story of heartbreak, loss, abandonment, and a child she never expected to see again. A child she'd been forced to leave behind 5 years ago under circumstances too painful for words. Inside the chapel, Rhett Callahan, a tall, rugged rancher with scars that told stories of broken bones, broken promises, and sleepless nights, adjusted the collar of his crisp white shirt while trying to steady his heartbeat, pretending everything was normal when deep down nothing had been normal since the day his wife vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but a short note and a baby boy sleeping in a wicker basket, their son, Caleb, whom he had raised alone, with hands rough from ranch labor, but gentle when touching the child who reminded him every day of a love that had disappeared like morning mist. The crowd whispered as Rhett stood at the altar, some saying he deserved happiness, others quietly judging how quickly he had moved on. Only Rhett hadn't moved on. Not really. He was simply tired of being lonely, tired of raising a child with no mother on a ranch that echoed every sunset, with memories of laughter that no longer existed. Caleb, now 5, sat in the first pew, swinging his small cowboy boots against the wood as his wide hazel eyes moved around curiously, unaware of how today would change everything. He clutched a small wooden horse his father had carved for him, something that had become his comfort object whenever he felt nervous. And though Rhett tried to keep his expression calm, inside he was crumbling. Every step of this wedding felt wrong, heavy, forced, yet he told himself this was for Caleb, for stability, for a life that no longer hurt. Just as the organ music began and everyone turned toward the double doors, Rhett inhaled deeply, preparing to meet his new future. Yet the moment the doors opened and Ilara appeared, his entire body froze, eyes widening, breath shattering like thin ice beneath a desperate footstep, because standing there in a white gown was not just any woman. It was her, the woman he loved, the woman he never stopped searching for, the woman who disappeared and left him drowning in questions, the mother of his child. And the world stopped. Ilara's veil slipped as shock flooded her features. There was Rhett, the only man she ever loved, the man she was told had remarried, moved away, forgotten her. Yet here he was, standing at the altar, waiting for a bride. And she was that bride. Unknowingly walking toward the very future fate had stolen from them years ago. Her lips parted as her eyes filled with tears. But before she could speak, before anyone could process what was happening, Caleb stood up, his small face going pale, his voice soft at first, then louder, filled with recognition and a child's raw innocence as he pointed a trembling finger toward her and whispered, then shouted, "Papa, that's my mama." The whole church fell silent as gasps rippled like wildfire. Ilara's knees buckled and she grabbed the pew to steady herself, tears spilling as the little boy ran toward her with the desperation of a child who had spent years wishing for a mother's arms. Rhett felt his knees weaken, his throat close, and his hands tremble uncontrollably, part disbelief, part anger, part aching relief, because he didn't know whether to hold her, scream at her, or fall to his knees and thank heaven for bringing her back. When Caleb reached her, Elara dropped to her knees, forgetting dignity, forgetting guests, forgetting everything except the small boy with her eyes and Rhett's jawline. She cupped his face with trembling hands and sobbed, pressing trembling kisses to his hair as she whispered, "My baby. Oh God, my baby. I'm so sorry." And Caleb wrapped his tiny arms around her neck with a grip so fierce it could only come from years of longing. Rhett finally moved, slow at first, then faster, stepping down from the altar, every memory flooding back. Their laughter, their vows under the cottonwood tree by the lake, the way she held Caleb the day he was born, and the night she disappeared without explanation. When he reached them, his voice was barely more than a whisper, rough with pain and love tangled together. "Elara, why?" She lifted her tear-soaked face, and the expression in her eyes nearly brought him to his knees. Regret, love, fear, and a plea for forgiveness he wasn't ready to give. "I didn't leave you," she choked out, her chest heaving. "I was taken." The room erupted with murmurs, judgment shifting into confusion and shock. Rhett froze again. Taken? What did that mean? But before he could ask, the doors swung open again with a violent crash, and a tall man in a dark suit, the groom she was meant to marry for political power and wealth, stormed inside, with rage blazing in his eyes. "Elara," he growled, "you belong to me." Rhett instinctively stepped in front of her and Caleb, shoulders squared, every protective instinct roaring alive. His voice was low, dangerous, edged with a warning sharp enough to cut steel. "She belongs to no one." Elara clung to Caleb as the groom sneered. "She was promised to me long before today. Rancher. Her family owes me. She has no choice." Rhett's jaw hardened as years of heartbreak transformed into fury and purpose. He finally had the woman he loved back, and no man was going to take her again. Caleb grabbed his father's shirt and whispered, scared, "Papa, don't let him take Mama again." The word again hit Rhett like a bullet. He knelt, one arm around his son, the other reaching toward Elara, his voice softer as he looked into her trembling eyes. "If you want to leave, tell me. But if you want to stay, if you want this family back, I will fight the whole damn world to make sure no one hurts you again." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "Rhett, I never stopped loving you. I never stopped trying to come home." The church held its breath as Rhett rose, pulling her gently behind him while facing the furious groom with a cold stare. The groom raised a hand, signaling two men outside to come forward, hired guards, but before they could take another step, half the room stood up. Ranch hands, neighbors, men who worked beside Rhett for years, men who saw him bleed, break, and raise a child alone. Hats came off, spurs clinked against wood, and one by one they positioned themselves behind him. The groom paled. The balance of power shifted. Rhett's voice echoed through the chapel. "This wedding isn't happening. Not today. Not like this." Then he gently turned to Caleb and Elara, lifting Caleb into one arm while offering his other arm to the woman who broke and rebuilt his heart in the same breath. "Let's go home," he whispered. Elara nodded silently, gripping his arm with trust and desperation. The guests parted as the three of them walked down the aisle together. not as strangers, not as broken pieces, but as a family fate had tried and failed to destroy. Outside, the sky shifted from storm grey to soft sunlight, like the world itself finally exhaled. Caleb leaned his head on Ilara's shoulder and whispered, sleepy and emotional, "Mama, you came back." And she kissed his forehead with a vow trembling off her lips. "This time, I'm never leaving again." Behind them, the church doors shut, and with them, the past. The ranch felt different the moment Rhett, Ilara, and Caleb crossed the worn wooden fence line. As if the land itself recognized her, as if the wind carried whispers of welcome home through the tall prairie grass, swaying beneath the orange glow of sunset. Horses lifted their heads, ears twitching, and the old loyal cattle dog Boone came sprinting toward them with barks of excitement before slowing mid-run, sniffing Ilara's hand carefully, as though confirming something lost but familiar, then finally leaning his head against her leg with a low whine, tail wagging in slow, emotional recognition. She dropped to her knees, burying her face in his fur, and Rhett watched with a mixture of relief and lingering uncertainty tugging sharply inside him. For years he'd imagined this moment, sometimes filled with anger, sometimes filled with longing. But now that she was here, tangible and real, neither dream nor ghost, he didn't know how to hold the storm inside him. Caleb tugged Rhett's hand and whispered, "Papa, Mama needs a room." And that simple sentence hit Rhett harder than a wildfire wind, because that word, Mama, felt both miraculous and terrifying. A reminder of what they'd lost and also what they might rebuild. Ilara rose, brushing tears from her cheeks, and followed them into the house, the same home she had once decorated with wildflowers and sunlight, now filled with loneliness disguised as order. The dining table had only 2 chairs, not 3. The kitchen counter held Rhett's rough attempts at cooking, and the walls that once held framed laughter now stood bare, as if he had erased her to survive. She paused in the doorway, her breath trembling as her gaze explored every inch, the familiar wooden beams overhead, the handmade shelves, the fireplace she once curled beside, holding a newborn Caleb. And her voice cracked as she whispered, "You kept everything." Rhett swallowed hard. "Couldn't bring myself to change it." She nodded, tears falling again, and before the weight of silence crushed them both, Caleb wiggled between them and grabbed both their hands, saying softly, "Can we eat together, like a family?" The way he said it, hesitantly, as if afraid the answer might destroy him, broke them both open, and Ilara knelt to hug him, while Rhett turned away to steady himself, jaw tightening against emotions he didn't yet know how to voice. Dinner was quiet but warm, filled with soft smiles and stolen glances, the kind of silence that wasn't empty, but healing. Caleb talked the most, telling stories about school, horses, and how Papa made the worst pancakes but the best hot cocoa. And every time he mentioned Rhett, Ilara's eyes softened with something deep and unspoken, pride, gratitude, and guilt tangled together like barbed wire and silk. After Caleb fell asleep, curled between them on the couch, Ilara finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper, "Rhett, you deserve the truth." He didn't interrupt, just listened, heart pounding, hoping and fearing what was coming. She told him everything, how her wealthy, controlling father had despised Rhett, calling him nothing but horse sweat and dirt, how her unexpected pregnancy ruined business deals, how her father fabricated lies, claiming Rhett planned to take Caleb away and disappear. She told Rhett her father locked her away in another state, threatened to kill Rhett if she ever tried to escape, took her phone, cut her off from the world. And when she finally did escape, months later, her father told her Rhett remarried and no longer wanted her. "I tried to come home," she whispered, her voice shaking. "But every door, every call I attempted was blocked. And then, the man I was supposed to marry today, he wasn't a suitor. He was a transaction to control me." Rhett's fists curled, knuckles white and trembling, fury radiating through every heartbeat, not at her, never at her, but at the man who stole their life. "Why didn't you keep fighting?" he finally asked, his voice soft but raw. Her eyes lifted to his, broken and honest. "Because after so many walls and lies, a part of me believed maybe you didn't need me anymore." Rhett closed his eyes, exhaling a breath that felt like 5 years of grief. Then he reached across the couch, fingers brushing hers, hesitant yet magnetic, as if relearning how to touch someone he never stopped loving. "Ilara," he whispered, voice cracking. "I woke up every morning hoping you'd walk through that door. I never replaced you. I never stopped loving you." She covered her mouth with shaking hands as tears streamed silently. For the first time in years, the silence between them didn't feel like distance. It felt like a bridge slowly rebuilding. But peace never lasted long when the past still hunted. 2 nights later, under a quiet moon and a sky full of stars, tires crunched along the gravel drive, headlights cutting through darkness, and Rhett's instincts ignited before the truck even stopped. He stepped outside, shotgun in hand, jaw locked as the wealthy groom from the church stepped out of the vehicle with 2 armed men behind him, confidence slick and poisonous. "I'm here for what belongs to me," the groom sneered. Behind Rhett, Ilara appeared in the doorway, Caleb clinging to her gown, fear wide in his eyes. Rhett stepped forward, voice low and lethal. "You need to turn around and leave before you regret breathing near my family." The groom laughed, the kind of laugh wealthy men use when they believe money outranks morality. "Family," he taunted. "She's a contract, a debt, and the child—" He didn't finish, because Rhett's fist collided with his jaw before the insult fully left his mouth, sending him stumbling backward. Guns raised instantly, but before blood could spill, a row of headlights appeared behind Rhett, ranch trucks, neighbors, and friends stepping out with rifles ready. Word had spread. The community that watched Rhett raise Caleb alone now stood behind him without question, because this time no one was taking anything from him. The standoff lasted seconds, but felt eternal, until the groom, realizing he was outnumbered and outmatched, spit blood onto the dirt and hissed, "This isn't over." Rhett stepped closer, eyes burning with protective fire. "You're damn right it isn't," he said, "because next time you show up here, I won't be so polite." The groom retreated, tires spraying gravel as he sped away into the night, leaving the ranch yard thick with adrenaline and silence. When the trucks finally drove off and the night calmed, Rhett returned to Ilara and Caleb, kneeling so his eyes met theirs. "He won't take you," he said, voice steady and full of steel. "Not now. Not ever." Ilara cupped, his face with both hands, forehead against his, tears falling freely. "Rhett," she whispered, voice trembling with love and relief. "I'm home. For good." Caleb wrapped his little arms around them, and the 3 held each other beneath the quiet glow of the moon, not broken anymore, but restored. The wind carried the sound of horses and rustling grass as if the earth itself finally rested. And in that stillness, Rhett made a silent vow, only the stars witnessed, to protect this family with every breath he had left. Because sometimes love isn't soft. Sometimes it's a storm, willing to destroy anything that threatens it. As the night settled around them like a blanket, Caleb sleepily murmured, "Forever, family?" Rhett kissed his head and whispered, "Forever." And if you're watching, feeling your heart tighten and your breath catch, then hit that subscribe button, because more stories like this are waiting, and you don't want to miss the next chapter of love, fate, and the kind of devotion that survives anything.